for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
This electronic field trip brought to you by the Best Buy Children's Foundation.
Here we are at the start of this electronic field trip about racing, and we don't have a race car. Seems like we're missing a pretty big piece of the show, doesn't it? Well, we're starting this way on purpose. Today, you and I will build a race car. Of course, we'll need a lot of parts to actually build a car. Do you have any idea on what sorts of things you need to build a race car? Go ahead, shout them out. Let's hear it. Shock, tires,
wings,
a body,
AM/FM stereo.
I think I heard most of the pieces we'll use on a race car, and a few that probably won't make the cut. But how do we know which pieces to use, and exactly how they should be designed? Well, that's where physics come in, because we're not just going to build a race car, we'll design it, test, experiment, then build a really fast car. Time to get started.
Welcome to Indianapolis, Indiana. We're here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to explore the roles of science and math in the sport of auto racing. Here with me today is Terry Wigner. Terry has had a long career in television production, and he used to work for ESPN. Welcome, Terry.
Well, thank you a lot, Jesse. It's going to be a fun day. Yeah, I've had the honor of actually producing a couple of Indy 500s here, and it's so exciting to be right where we are here at Victory Podium. Some of the greatest race car drivers to ever live have been right up here. Guys like Dale Earnhardt Sr., Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, Al Unser Sr. It's just a great place to be. So tell me, we're going to go ahead and do a bunch of experiments today. And how many students were here to get ready?
9.
9 students. And what have you been doing? How long have you been here? What kind of things?
We've been here about 6 days, and we've been a lot of places. We've been go-kart racing.
Ah, cool.
We've met a lot of interesting people that you're going to meet today.
Yeah, that's great. So there'll be 9 kids that'll be helping us all day with the experiments. But in addition to that, we have a great lineup, a really good lineup of former drivers and current drivers and aspiring drivers that want to be up here someday. So guys like Scott Goodyear will be with us. He's an announcer for ABC and ESPN, and probably one of the best drivers to ever drive at this racetrack. We've got Jeff Green, a current star with Best Buy, and he was a former NASCAR champion in the Busch Series. And I think there's one other favorite you want to mention, right?
Antron Brown.
Yeah, Antron Brown, one of the fastest guys on 2 wheels, will be with us. Kevin Forbes, who runs the entire speedway, will be along as well to make sure he can answer any questions that you might have. And then we have Dylan Welsh, who's a 13-year-old aspiring race car driver, right? And Stephanie Mockler, who's going to be a USAC star, already is, and he'll show people how to, for women that want to get into racing. So it's going to be a good day, isn't it? Yeah?
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So let's first get started. There's a 1-minute tour we want to show you, and Ron Green, the Director of Communications here at this great speedway, will show that to you now.
Hello, I'm Ron Green, Director of Public Relations for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Let me show you around. The first thing you might notice about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is its size. This place is enormous. The entire racetrack is 2.5 miles long. On the inside of the track, there's plenty of room for grandstands, race garages, a hospital, a massive museum, and other support facilities, and even a few holes of the Brickyard Crossing golf course. The track has not always looked like this, though. When built in 1909 as an automobile testing facility, the surface was made of crushed stone and tar. Before the first Indianapolis 500 was run in 1911, the track surface had been upgraded to street paving bricks. That's why they call this track the Brickyard. In fact, if you go look at the track, the start-finish line is still made of bricks. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway plays host to 3 big events here every year. In May, we have the greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500. In June, the Formula One cars race on the road course. And in July, NASCAR pulls into town for the All-State 400 at the Brickyard. Okay, we're running out of time. There's so much more to see here at the Speedway. You need to come and visit and explore on your own.
Thank you, Ron. I'm here and joined today with Jonathan Cadet, who's a 7th grader at Raymond Park Middle School here in Indianapolis. And Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to learn here today now that we've seen some of the things here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
Well, today we're going to learn about the body of the race car, which would be this, the tires, which are here, the wings, which would be this and that, and the drivers, like right here.
Well, thank you. A retired driver. But first thing we're going to do here today is learn about air resistance and the body of a race car. And to do that, we're going to go to our current driver, Sarah Fisher.
It's time to get started building your race car. The place to start, of course, is with the body of the car. There's a lot more that goes into these bodies than just a shiny paint job. You have to take into consideration just how fast the cars are going and how much air resistance they'll face. In fact, that may be a good way to start the process today. Let's learn more about air resistance and then take what we've learned to pick the best body for our race car.
We're here for your first crew chief challenge today, and it's going to be on air resistance. Now I'm going to show Miranda here is going to demonstrate air resistance on our motorcycle here, how it helps and hurt us. First, air resistance is going to hurt us in performance, so that's why we go down a racetrack. We're in a full body tuck position just like this, so we have the least amount of air resistance on as possible, so the bike can go as fast and we can win a lot of drag races. Now, as we slow down, Miranda actually is going to make herself into a parachute, because this is how we slow the motorcycle down to a safe speed before it can actually start to apply the front and rear brakes after a 200-mile-an-hour run. Now, Miranda, tell us a little bit about Crew Chief Challenge today.
Well, Entron, as you said, it involves air resistance. So we have 2 teams, and each team has an egg and a parachute. We'll drop the egg in the parachute, and air resistance will help slow the egg down and make it land safely on the ground. The team whose egg lands the safest wins.
So you guys and girls in the classroom, get your experiment ready, and we'll see you back in a couple minutes.
Now to Kevin and Russell at turn 1.
Thanks, Miranda and Antron. Rasul and I are standing on the first turn of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we're going to talk about air resistance. Air resistance is simply the load or the force that's applied to a body or an object as it moves through the air. Now, there are several factors that determine air resistance, but the 2 most important factors are the size of the object and the velocity that it's moving. For example, this pin is very small. And so if it were very windy right now, I would really not feel much air resistance on this pin. But if I stood with my arms out and put the full force and full front area of my body in front of the wind, I would experience a lot of air resistance.
Yeah, like Kevin said. Like, for example, if you're riding in a car and you stick your hand out the window and you're going pretty fast, that wind's going to blow your hand way back. But when you turn your hand sideways, it blows right by it.
Now, scientists and engineers use specific mathematical formulas to calculate air resistance and drag. These formulas contain variables such as velocity, the size of the vehicle, the shape of the body, as well as the density of air. And designers must balance and optimize all of these when developing race cars.
Yeah, we want to maximize the speed. The only variable is the surface area of the front car. We have to minimize that in order to maximize the top speed, and so we can go faster. That's why the surface area of Indy cars are small like jets, and that's why Indy cars average higher speeds than stock cars.
Now we're going to take it back to Scott Goodyear, and he's going to show us examples of air resistance on his car.
Thanks, guys. And you know something? For me, I always loved the single-seater cars because they were so small and least air resistance going through the air. The stock cars, though, you can see how large they are, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the program about how they make these cars go through the air so quickly. The single-seater cars, which I've always loved, like the Indy cars here that go over 220 miles an hour at the Speedway, a much smaller body, so it goes through the air a lot easier, in my viewpoint. And I love to sit inside this open-wheel cockpit area because you get all the air rushing over you at that 220 miles an hour. Now we're going to go back to the crew chief section with Anton and Miranda, and we're going to have a look to see what kind of experiments they are working on today.
So I hope you can now start to see the importance and the relationships between air pressure, air resistance, drag, the size and shape of the car, and how it affects the performance of a race car on a track. Now we're going to go back to Antron and Miranda to see how the crew chief challenge is going.
Remember, when we design the body of a race car, we want the least amount of air resistance we can get.
Now we are back at our crew chief challenge, and I have my guys and girls from the Best Buy group is going to be against the student body over here. So first step up, we're going to have Max and Jenny here from Best Buy is actually going to demonstrate their egg parachute here and see how it's got to hit the ground safely. So what they want and what they're trying to derive is they're trying to get the most amount of air resistance to slow the egg down so it will not break when it touches the ground. Let's release. A little break there in action. Miranda, bring up your group and let's see how well they do.
I really don't think they had the parachute ready. Their parachute's not tied.
Okay, well,
so let's have the Best Buy group go ahead while they're working on that.
Exactly. Let's let them finish up real fast. Let's bring up the second group here.
Fast.
While our kids actually finish theirs up, and now we're just trying to get the most amount of air resistance out of this deal right here, so it can actually try to get to the ground and land safely to the ground. As you can see, the construction of parachute, the first one there was actually, this one here looks a little bit more large and a little bit more bigger. So hopefully the wind can actually make it land safely to the ground. Let's see how you guys make out this on this try. It's still cracked. That one there had a little bit more velocity going to the ground, so we want the greatest amount of air resistance here, so hopefully it can touch the ground safely. Let's see how our kids are making out in their experiment over here, actually putting it together here.
They have a pretty bigger bag than the first one over there on Best Buy.
Okay, so they're actually working diligently and getting it together.
They may have a shot.
So, could you explain to me, Cheyenne, what you're trying to do here with the bag here for air resistance, what you guys are trying to conform here and trying to build? What is the right construction to actually get this to work?
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the bag to make a hole in it to tie it so that I can make this thing, you know, be bigger and try to come down with more air resistance so it won't crack.
We're getting there. Okay. We're getting there.
Now, Ricky, what are you doing with your parachute?
I'm trying to make ours bigger so that we can have more air resistance to like catch the air so the eggs land safely.
Wow.
Let's turn around so they can actually see the experiment a little bit. There we go. And they're constructing it right now. Look, they actually got a little bit wow, they're constructing theirs actually a little bit bigger. So hopefully the air resistance here will actually slow it down and do exactly what we want it to do, actually come to the ground slow enough so it doesn't crack the egg. And this experiment really does work. Now, for all you kids in the classroom, while we're actually taking time, while they're actually getting theirs together, you can still do this in the classroom. Make sure you're getting your experiment together so you can actually try it in your classroom while we're doing it at the same time that you're doing. That's what the Crew Chief Challenge is all about.
And try to compare your results to the ones that our teams have.
Make different configurations, different sizes, and see what group of kids in your classroom can actually make it work and who's going to be the winner. Are we almost ready here? How much more do we have? Just a little bit more? And air resistance is a very key factor, especially to us on the racetrack, on race vehicles, because air resistance actually slows us down. So in racing, we always want to go faster, so we always try to make sleek body styles, make our race vehicles low to the ground, have less air resistance so we can have more speeds. And we use actually air resistance as safety features to actually slow us down. and that's a key element that we use on the motorcycle. We actually make the human parachute. On my teammate's car, Tony Schumacher, standing behind our Best Buy team here, he uses 2 parachutes to slow himself down from over 330 miles an hour.
And John, I think we have one of the students ready.
All right, let's go. Let's get up there. Shine, let's show us. Let's see what yours can do.
Scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs on the ground a little bit, but that's all right. The parachute didn't open up, but look, it was the right construction. I think it was, but that's how air resistance was not a safe vehicle right there. Let's see what we got there on our next team there. Well, today I think it was a little bit windy here at the Speedway, so we're going to turn it over. All right, so that's it for our experiments today, but Miranda, tell us a little bit about your trip to the museum.
Well, I can tell you, but I can show you in this next clip also. We're talking about air resistance, and I thought a neat place to take a look at race cars and air resistance would be the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum. In this museum, they have cars that date back to some of the very first Indy 500s. Let's go inside and take a look. So here we have some of the earliest cars to race in the Indy 500. Keep in mind we're talking about air resistance, and then take a look at these cars. They sure don't look like they were built with air resistance in mind. The fronts of these cars are big, flat surfaces that create lots and lots of air resistance. Of course, the winning car in the first Indy 500 was only going 74 miles per hour. Time for a little time travel. Let's go forward a few years. Clearly, the people designing the race cars started to learn more about air resistance. As we walk along the cars, you can tell that they are starting to change. Those big flat surfaces on the front of the cars are disappearing and the cars look slicker. As we keep up our time travel and walk along this line of race cars, you can start to see all the fine tuning that has been done. Every year, the cars look a little sleeker as more and more air resistance is taken out. Now imagine yourself standing in this museum in 100 years. What cars will be on display then? It sure seems like race cars we see today are just about as smooth and as fast as they can get, but someone, maybe you, will figure out how to take away just a little more air resistance to make these cars drive even faster.
Done our experiment, and we've actually learned a little bit about the body styles of cars, and we've talked a little bit about air resistance. We're going to have to now choose our favorite type of body style. Okay, so Jake, why don't you go first? Out of the 4 that we have available, what is your favorite body style?
I like number 1, the stock car, because it's nice and smooth, so the air can go right over the top of it.
Very good choice, Jake. I like that choice.
And Jeff, this is your Best Buy car, so these cars, even though they're very big, they're very unique because the air does flow over them quite well, does it not?
It does, Scott. It's this is our new Impala SS, and it's got very nice flowing lines. It's got a lot of places we can get a lot of downforce with. It is probably more resistance than what you drive, Scott, but it all leads back to a brand new wing that we've got on these stock cars. So this is a new look for NASCAR, and this is the future right here for us.
And actually, Jonathan, our favorite car is a single-seater car, right? And why is that?
I think it's because it's much more lower to the floor and has much lesser air resistance than the stock car over there. So I think, yeah.
And there's less mass to go through the air, isn't it? Now, if you were a driver, would you like to be inside of a car like that, or would you like to sit in the open cockpit here with that air rushing over you at 220 miles an hour?
I actually prefer open.
That's why him and I are buddies, I'll tell you that. I agree, because it's just a great feeling to have the air flowing over you at 220 miles an hour. Now that we've talked a little bit about the body styles and we learned about air resistance, we're actually going to start to answer some of your questions. And to do that, we're going to go over to Terry and Jesse. Guys?
Well, thanks, Scott. It's really great to, we're off to a really good start. And what we can do now is we can take your phone calls on the 800 number. We've got it up on the screen for you. So any of you watching all over the country can just give us a buzz. And we'll have a way for you to call in, ask any of our panel a question, and you can also get us on the discussion forum, which is on the internet. So feel free to get on either one of those right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, you know what we probably could do, guys, while we're waiting on some cars? Why don't we go ahead and show some of the differences, if you would, with maybe Scott and Jeff, and then we'll get some calls that'll come in. What do you think, Scott?
Great, thanks Terry. Jesse, you know something, when we talked about these cars, the single-seater car and the stock car itself, you know, stock cars started running here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway back in 1994 when they first came here, and they realized it's very long straightaways here at Indianapolis, 5/8 of a mile long. This track is 2.5 miles around to complete one lap. Now the Indy cars go around here at 220 to 230 miles an hour, and the stock cars, Jeff, are just a little bit slower because you've got a larger mass that we're talking about, more air to actually get this race car going through. It has to be really pushed because of the big frontal area on these cars. So what's the speed that you guys run around this racetrack?
I think, you know, the average is probably close to 190, 195, and like you said, Scott, this car is just a bigger, bulky body. You can see all the sheet metal that we've got on our Impala here, and it takes a lot more horsepower to overcome the drag that we put out compared to your Indy car.
Now this car is what they call the car tomorrow, I think it is,
yes,
because
it is.
it's I guess it's the car today because you guys are now running it. But this looks to me like a single-seater style, Indy style wing on here. Are you guys stealing some of our secrets, or what's up?
Well, we hope so. We hope to get some of that speed for sure, especially in our Best Buy Chevy. But this is actually, NASCAR has come up with this car, and they've been working on it for 4 or 5 years. And what they're trying to do is get rid of the dirty air behind the car. With the spoiler like we have in years past, it pitches the air up in the atmosphere, and the car behind doesn't get any air on the nose of his car. It makes the car push. So they're after this wing to try to help that dirty air and not have that push behind another car.
And Jonathan, this wing that they have in the back of their car is very similar to the one that we have in the back of our Indy car, isn't it?
Yes,
and
it
we
is.
talked about these wings before, and if you look over here at AJ Foyt's car from many years ago, you can see how the wings were much bigger on the front, and they were stationary. They really weren't adjustable. The rear wing itself also very large and wasn't adjustable. But then now you can turn around and you can see these wings here are a little bit smaller, but the cars produce just as much downforce. So that gives our drivers a real confident builder to be able to drive these cars back around this race course. So now we're going to go back to Terry and to Jesse and maybe answer a few of your questions. Guys?
Thanks, guys. Great explanation, huh? Wasn't it good?
Yep.
Yep. I'll tell you what we might do while we're still waiting on some phone calls is quickly go over to Antron again, and he's got Dylan and Stephanie. So a lot of you watching might wonder, how in the world do I get started in this sport, huh?
Yeah.
So let's see what they have to say.
Definitely on the left here, I got Stephanie Mockler. Now, Stephanie, tell us a little bit about what type of racing and what kind of car you drive.
Right now I'm doing midgets. I started out in the lower levels. I started out in quarter midgets. They're a little more popular, like 5 to 16 is what you can run them. And then I moved up to 600s, and they have a wing on them like they were talking about over there for a little more downforce. And then I went to a car like you've seen over here. It's called a midget, but it had a Ford Focus motor in it, like you see the cars, the Ford cars on the road, that has that engine in it. And then now I'm running a midget. It's like the same car, but it's got a like 340 horsepower engine in it, and it weighs 900 pounds. So it's just kind of like a gradual step of learning and keeping my dream in sight. So.
Well, for sure, and your dreams definitely look bright. I can tell with the smile, for sure.
Thank you.
And over here we got Dylan. Now, Dylan, tell us a little bit. I see that your car's in the background, and I see you're very determined, and you're on fire right now, huh?
Yeah. I got my start the same as Stephanie. I started running quarter midgets when I was 7, and this is my first year running a Kenyan midget, and like Antron said, that's my car back there. And the Kenyan midget has about 120 horsepower engine in it, weighs about 1,100 pounds. So this is going to be my first year in it, and looking forward to having fun.
All right, and definitely, tell us a little bit about your start. Like, what made you want to do this?
Well, my dad, who does some pit reporting for the IndyCar races, met a driver named Billy Boat, and he was selling his quarter midget, and we bought that, and then just kind of went on from there.
Well, cool deal. And that's how you get started in races. Have a dream and inspire yourself and go after and get it. And that's what it's all about. But now I'm going to toss it back over to Scott.
Antron, thank you. You know something, we've learned a lot here. And Jonathan, just give us a bit of a recap of what we found out here this morning.
Well, we found out about the body styles, which would be the Indy car right here and our NASCAR right here. And it all has to do with air resistance. Like this one might have much more air resistance than the Indy car itself. So that's basically it.
It's neat, and actually these cars all go very fast around here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now our phone lines are back up and working. We actually have a couple of calls, and we're going to take your questions. So we're going to go back to Terry and to Jesse.
Thank you, Scott.
Who do we have?
I understand that we have Abby from New York. Abby, what's your question?
Go ahead, Abby. We can hear you.
What racer has the fastest car?
Which one of these are the fastest car? Oh, what racer has the fastest car? Well, there's, I would say probably Antron could answer that. That's the, maybe the car behind him goes the fastest. Antron?
Well, for sure. It's not my race vehicles, not my motorcycles, not an Indy car, NASCAR. It has to be my teammate, Tony Schumacher. His top fuel dragster reaches speeds over 330 miles an hour in just a quarter mile, 2 football field lengths. So it accelerates 0 to 100 in less than 1 second, 0.8 seconds, and 4.4 seconds. Imagine being 330 miles an hour and pulling more G's in a space shuttle. So that's my teammate, the U.S. Army top fuel dragster, Tony Schumacher.
Oh my gosh, that was great. And Mitchell, I think you're on with us now. Can you hear us, Mitchell? Do you have a question for us?
Mitchell, what's your question? We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
If NASCAR has too much air resistance, will it flip?
We heard the air
resistance, will it flip?
Will it what? Oh, will it flip? Well, there's one guy that can probably answer that better than anybody, right? Let's send it over to Jeff. Jeff, what do you think?
Will it flip?
Yeah, okay. Jeff, will the car flip ever?
Actually, I've been on the other hand of that. I've been upside down at Daytona in about 4 or 5 years ago, and since then, NASCAR has come up with some different things that will help our cars stay on the ground. When we get spun out or get turned around, these flaps open in our cowls, which releases air from underneath the hood, keep it from being like a parachute like we were trying to see earlier. And actually, we've got cowl flaps back here that open up. I got one on each side that actually like a brake on an airplane and a flap on an airplane, and that actually keeps our cars on the ground. So that's a great question.
Great job. That's really good stuff. Now, don't forget, you can keep calling in or you can get to our discussion panel, so we'll make sure we answer your questions. But now we're going to move on. We're going to hear from Sarah Fisher again and get us to our next section. Sarah?
Okay, it looks like we've picked the sleekest, fastest racing body we could find. Now we need to add another very important part of the race car, the tires. Your choice this time is going to be a little trickier. Tires come in a variety of styles, hard, soft, slick, knobby, and all sorts of variations in between. Each style of tire creates different friction, so you're going to have to figure out if friction is good or bad and just how much we need to get these cars going fast.
We're here back on the first turn of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to talk about friction. Now, friction is just simply the force that occurs between any two objects that have mass, either sliding across each other or going through each other.
Yeah, there are 4 types of friction. There's static, where the 2 objects don't move at all. There's sliding, where the 2 objects slide past each other. And then there's rolling, like the car. Picture my hand as the track, the top of the car as the other object, and the wheels are the rolling part. And they roll. And then there's fluid. Fluid could be a liquid or a gas. So this right here could be considered as fluid friction.
Now, where friction plays a very key role in racing, and I want to show you right here, right on the racetrack. A typical race car obviously has only 4 tires, and the only part that keeps the track on the ground is the part where the tires touch the track surface. So it's very important that for the car to maintain control, that there is plenty of friction between the tires and the track surface. When the car starts to go through the corner, if there's good friction, the car is under control. Without that friction, the car is out of control and into the wall. Now we're going to take it back to Jeff Green, where he's going to show us some examples of friction on his car.
Thanks, guys. It's our friction is good at this point. We have our Goodyear Eagles, and NASCAR mandates what tire we run at each racetrack, and you know, on your passenger car you have treaded tires, which on a race car we want every millimeter of rubber we can get on the racetrack, and that's why you see a slick race tire on a race car to get every adhesion, all the friction you can get each and every corner you get there. Guys?
So it's important to understand all of the variables that relate to friction and how it holds the car in control. We can change the tire composition, we can change the tire makeup, treads, no treads, downforce, air resistance, all those things play in how well we maintain friction on the racetrack and keeping that car in control. Now we're going to take it back to Scott, Dylan, and Stephanie in pit row.
The friction between my tires and the track keep my car from sliding up into the wall.
You know something, guys, one thing that we always do here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is pit stops. And you know, going 220 miles an hour and then coming to this pit box here and stopping in your pit marks to be able to allow the crew to do their work is very, very difficult. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier, guys, and Stephanie, you guys don't do pit stops in your type of racing, but have you ever watched the Indianapolis 500 and sort of wondered how that all takes place?
Oh yeah, it's amazing to me. In our races, we don't do pit stops. We just do the, we have one set of tires we go out on, and if anything goes wrong, we get a flat, we can come in and change it. But in our racing, the green flag laps do not count, so we lose laps. But when you come in the racetrack from the amazing speeds they're going to whatever the pit lane speeds are, that's amazing to me. And to be able to hit your small box and stop in that box and everyone to do stuff and be coordinated enough to get everything together just in time, that's amazing to me.
And it's a lot of pressure on the drivers, which you might experience one day if you have a chance to come do pit stops at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And it's a lot of pressure on the crew also because they have to change those 4 tires and add the 22 gallons of ethanol fuel in the cars today, Dylan. And I know that your dad works a lot in the ABC ESPN races, and I get a chance to work with him, and we talk about pit stops a lot, but you don't do pit stops either in your Kenyan midget here. But have you ever thought about what it might be like to try to come down that pit lane at that speed and try and do that?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people think of racing as more of an individual sport with just the driver, but it's really more of a team sport because the guys on the other side of the wall have to do just as much work as the driver. They got to make sure they get all their work done in time for the driver to get out there and not lose any spots.
And absolutely, and that work is done 6 to 8 seconds sometimes, and if it's a slow pit stop, it is done in 10. So a lot of pressure on the crew members when they do that pit stop. And I know as a driver, when you're inside the car, your heart rate goes up. Well, I can tell you the crew member's heart rate also goes up. And now we're going to talk a little bit else what we do actually in the pit stops. And when we change those tires, sometimes we change that's what we call the tire stagger. And to learn more about that, we're going to head back down to turn 1 with our Firestone tire stagger ruler. Guys?
Thanks, Scott. This right here is the stagger roller, everybody. This shows how the stagger in the wheels of the tires when the Indy cars are racing. This has 2 Indy wheels on 1 axle. The right wheel is 4/10 of an inch bigger than the left. And when I push it, the wheels stagger to the left. Now, in reality, within the race, the right wheel actually goes 3 miles more than the left. And when I pull this back, this will go exactly back into its right spot. That's the stagger roller. Now, let's go back to Jeff, Scott, and Jonathan, and Jake.
Remember, when we choose tires for our race car, we want friction to help us stick to the track.
Now that we've actually learned a little bit about the tires and about stagger and how it affects a race car, it's time to actually choose our type of tire that we want to actually put on our race car out of the 4 that are available. And Jake, what would be your preference for your type of tire?
I would have to choose number 3 because the slicks are wide and they're flat, so they have more friction than others.
That's a good choice, Jake. Why wouldn't you pick a 1 or like the number 4 that has the treaded tires?
Because then there's not as much surface area on the tire, so there would be less friction and less downforce.
You've been doing your studying, haven't you?
Yeah.
Maybe some young engineers coming along there, I think, Jeff. Excellent. Yep. And Jonathan, what would be your choice out of the 4 tires that we have available?
Out of the 4 tires, I would have to actually agree with Jake again. I would have to choose these tires because they have much more surface area, like you said, and because they gripped the floor much better than the tires with grooves on them.
And the grooves that we were talking about before, what are the grooves used for on road car tires? Why don't we use slick tires on the road?
Well, you don't want to use those type of tires because if you use slick tires on a raining road or one that has little pebbles inside of it, it might disarrange how good your car grips the floor, and it might even mess up your steering.
And that, you don't get the grip, you don't get that friction level there because you're just going to hydroplane and the tires are going to slide off onto the road. So we don't want that with our road cars. Now we have an opportunity to learn a little bit more here in this segment, so we're going to take some more of your questions, and to do that we're going to go back to Terry and Jesse. Guys?
Jesse!
We have Dante from Indiana. Dante, what's your question?
Do you hear us, Dante?
Dante, go ahead with your question.
Hello, hello. Dante, do you hear us? We're trying to hear you. Do you have a question for us?
Go ahead with your question, Dante.
Looks like we lost Dante. Well, well. How about Celeste, huh?
Celeste,
are you there? Do you hear us okay?
Yeah, my question was I can't say it.
Yeah, you're hearing your echo there. Go ahead, just concentrate.
How many tires do you use during a race? Sorry.
Who do you think could answer that?
I think that's a good question for Jeff Green.
Jeff Green, how many tires do you use during a race?
Thanks, guys. That's a great question. We go to a lot of different tracks across in our schedule throughout the season. Tracks are different, but for the most part, we use about 15 sets per weekend on the average. That's a great question.
15 sets of tires? That's got to be pretty expensive, huh? Looks like we've got, who do we have next?
Paul from New York. What's your question?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Paul, go ahead with your question.
I wanted to know on the NASCAR cars.
Go ahead.
What are on the back end? What are the holes for?
That's a good question for Jeff Green.
Yeah, Jeff, did you hear that one?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I think he's talking about the hose in the back window here on the quarter window. These are actually called NACADUCTs. It's a NASA. The name came from NASA, and what we do with them, we pull air that's coming across or down the side of our car into coolers, like the rear end cooler. This car is hooked up to the rear end cooler. We might use them for brake fans in the rear, so it's just a good way to get air inside the car and not create a lot of drag doing it. Great question. Back to you guys.
That was great. That's a new word for me. And I think we have Bethany here from Indiana. Bethany, can you hear us? Do you want to ask us a quick question?
Car and not create a lot of drag doing it. Great question. Back to you guys.
Bethany, do you have us? Do you hear us okay? Go ahead. No?
Bethany, go ahead with your question.
Wondering how many years it takes to build a stock car.
How many years does it take to build a stock car? I think you guys do them overnight, don't you, Jeff?
Yeah, it's and especially with the car tomorrow, like you see behind us here, Jake. I mean, this car probably was built in about a week. So I mean, as we go, we have two teams at Haas CNC Racing, and Johnny Sauter's the other driver. And actually, as we go, they can actually build a complete car from ground up in about 7 days.
That was great. I think even Dylan was talking about the teamwork that it takes, and the fact that it takes so many people that can build a car so quickly. It's pretty cool.
We have another caller. We have Anthony from Indiana. Anthony, what's your question? Anthony, we can hear you. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, Anthony. Go ahead. No? How about Sarah?
Sarah from New York?
Yeah, do you hear us in New York, Sarah? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the height of the car and the speed of the wind make a difference on the speed of the car?
Who do you think should get that one?
That's a good question for Scott Goodyear.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, it's very interesting because the wings play a crucial part in race cars, and we now see that the stock cars are starting to use the smaller rear wings that we have used on Indy cars here for the past amount of time to try and make some different downforce levels on their car. And the wings here on our Indy cars are actually starting to work very well on these type of cars because they help put the pressure down on the car themselves and push the car into the ground, which allows us to go around the turn so quicker. But the key thing is the bigger the wing, the more pressure on the car and the more grip going through the turn, but the more more drag going down the straightaway, so the car would actually go slower down the straightaway, although you might pick up some speed around the turn. So you have to find that balance, and that's why we have all those engineers on the race teams today to try to find out what the optimum setting is for all our type of race cars, whether it's a stock car or whether it's an Indy car. Guys?
Thanks, Scott. You guys are doing great. Keep the calls coming. We can do it all day as long as we're on the air here. And we can also go into our discussion forum because our drivers will go over to the computers and answer your questions there. So to wrap up this whole section, I think we're going to go back to Scott and Jonathan.
Thanks, guys. Now, Jonathan, we've learned a lot about this type of thing here with the friction and what have you. Can you tell us a bit of a recap on what we've learned here so far?
So far, we learned about friction and tires. Now remember, they don't only use slick tires on race cars. They also use tires that have grooves to keep them on the floor when the track is actually wet. So, two types.
Two types of tires, and those groove tires that you're talking about are the type that we actually use on the Indy car, and we use the groove tires, as we mentioned before, on our road cars because we want to dissipate all the water and the small marbles that you mentioned earlier in this segment. So that is great information that we got there. On our next segment, we're going to learn a little bit about downforce and also wings, and to do that, we're going to go to the IRL driver for the Dryer and Reinbolt team, Sarah Fisher.
You're all doing a great job so far. With a great race car body and some sticky tires, you've created a car that could be a pretty strong competitor in this year's Indy 500. Of course, we aren't done yet. Next, I want you to think about the wings on a race car. These are a really important part of giving a race car downforce. It'd probably be a good idea if we spent some time talking about downforce and all the different ways race cars create it. Then we'll choose the best wings for our car.
That's right, Sarah. Downforce is just simply the effect on an object being pushed down as it goes through the air. It's basically the opposite of what happens to an airplane as it goes through the air. The airplane is lifted, but downforce is just kind of the opposite direction. Now, to explain why downforce is important in racing, let's just put our hands together just for a second, and let's just rotate them. Let's just kind of rub them back and forth, and I'm putting my hands together very lightly. Now, as I press my hands very firmly together, you notice that it's much more difficult to move my hands around because in pressing my hands together, I've created much more friction. So what happens now, if we go down to the race car, we can kind of see what happens, that downforce is very important in that as the car is moving through the air, the car is designed so that the air moves across the race car, under the race car, over the wings, and as it does that, it actually pushes the car harder on the track, just like we were pressing our hands together. That downforce creates much more friction to help the car go through the turns without losing control.
Yeah, this is downforce, or Bernoulli's principle. You can think of my hand as like the wings. On a jet plane, the wings are tilted upward. Therefore, when the air pushes it, it is not downforce, and it forces it up into the air, therefore it flies. But Indy cars, their wings are tilted this way, so the downforce occurs actually pushing the cars down to the ground, which means you can have less mass to go faster.
Now, another important aspect in racing is inertia. Now, inertia is just simply a body's natural tendency to resist a change in motion. Inertia is actually described in Sir Isaac Newton's first law of motion. And basically it says that a body that's at rest tends to remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. For example, if I push on Rasul right here, he is going to resist that. He is going to resist that. Now, the other one, the other part of that law talks about a body that's moving in a straight line will remain in a straight line unless acted upon by a force. What's very important in racing is when a car is going almost 200 miles an hour in a straight line, it possesses a great deal of inertia and takes a great deal of force to make it go into a corner.
Yep, kind of like the race car. When you need friction to change inertia, right now, that's inertia. But friction causes that force, and when it moves, it can change direction. Now, let's go to Stephanie Mocha, where a race car experiences downforce.
All right. Right now we're talking about downforce on the car. Like I was saying, I used to run a 600 micro, and they have a wing on the top of them, kind of like that wing, but it's actually on top of the car. And I would say it's like putting, like when you're at speed, it's like putting people on top of your race car to actually like push down on the rear tires and cause more friction and hook the car up so it'll turn the corner better. And I also drive a car without a wing, and it's a lot different because when I go back into the wing, you can actually drive the car harder into the corner. So it's a lot different. You just have to, it's just something you have to get used to. Now back down to Kevin in turn 1.
Now we're hoping that you can start to see how all of these principles start to play on each other. Friction, downforce, air resistance, pressure, all of these things help the race car stay in control and the race car driver entertain his fans. Now we're going to go back to Antron and Miranda for our next crew chief challenge.
Those wings on my car create downforce, which helps it stick to the track.
All right, now we're back for our next crew chief challenge, and we're going to talk a little bit about downforce. Here, my partner Miranda is going to tell us a little bit about downforce.
Well, on the front wing, the wing creates downforce, which keeps the whole front end of the car on the ground. What about the back wing, Antron?
Well, the back wing does the exact same thing to keep this 330-mile-an-hour car on the ground. It actually puts 6,000 to 8,000 pounds of pressure on the rear of this car to keep it down on the ground when it's doing 330 miles an hour. So now, Miranda, take us into our crew chief challenge, because you kids in the classroom could do the exact same thing that we're doing here. So get your supplies ready while Miranda tells us about our next crew chief challenge.
Well, in our crew chief challenge, we're going to have straws and index cards. The teams are going to make wings out of the index cards and blow underneath them with a straw. The team that creates enough downforce wins.
As we got right here, I'm here with our Best Buy group. These are my guys and girls from Best Buy. And we just can't thank you guys and girls for what you do for the kids here. And now, let's start here with Luke. Luke, show us what your configuration does. See how it's bent around? So we're actually going to take the straw and blow the wind underneath the car. And the car should bellow down when he blows wind. Well, the whole car moved. That is not a good example. It was no downforce there. It was actually a sail. It didn't barrel down. It actually lifted off the ground, so it didn't have very good downforce. That was a very poor design because the front was bent down, so it actually made it be like a kite and actually flew up into the air. What do we have over there, Miranda, on our first try over there?
LJ has his wing, and it's pretty standard. It's just folded. So let's see if LJ will give it a blow and see if we get downforce. We got quite a bit of downforce.
Wow, did y'all see that action right there, how it just bent down? It had plenty of downforce and went down. And the way it happened was when he blew down and it shrunk to the ground, what it did was it created more wind speed on the bottom of it, and the top had less wind speed, which created downforce to push it down to the ground. That's a very important element there. Let's see what we made out over here with Alex. Alex has got a little bit of downforce, but not as much as LJ. Let's see how you actually make out. Let's do both of you, Jenny and Max, together. We got another Luke over there. We're taking off. And she's got a little bit of downforce. And I like the little wicker bills you built there, right there. That's pretty cool. Let's see what we have over there, Miranda.
Well, seems like all of our wings are built the same way. So maybe y'all want to show us if they'll create downforce too? Cheyenne's kind of went down, but it didn't go down touch table like LJ's.
Okay.
So, Caitlin? I think we got a little downforce, but...
Yes, we do. I don't think that everybody can blow like LJ can. That's what I think it is. Yeah. So you kids in the classroom, keep on doing your experiment. And then definitely, it's hands down that the kids beat the Best Buy group again. So the kids, give the kids a round of applause, doing a great job again. Those are engineers of tomorrow. And now we're going to turn it back over to Scott.
In front. Remember, when we make the wings of the race car, we want to increase the total downforce of the car. Antron, thank you. And now that we've actually done our experience and we've learned a little bit about downforce, it's time for us to choose what wing that we would like out of the 4 that are available on the sheet for us. So, Jake, why don't you go first?
I would have to go for number 3 because it looks like a little bit like this. You want your wing to be slanted down so the wind would just go that way.
That's right, Jake. The number 1 is actually the same wing, but it's turned around backwards, or it's got different angle on it. With the wing slanted in the front, it actually pushes down on the back of the car, and if it was angled the other way, it actually lift up on the car like an airplane wing, like Antron was talking about. So that's a great choice.
And Jeff, we've all had the car going around backwards, so now the wings are actually painted the wrong direction, almost like that wing number 1. And you and I know what happens in those situations.
Not
the
a
car
good situation.
sort of gets up in the air, and
That's
so that's
right.
not very much fun at all. Now, Jonathan, out of the 4 wings that we have available, your choice of wing would be which number?
My choice is most likely going to be 3, just as Jake said, because I don't want the car actually going up in the air. I want it staying down so that it stays to the floor and grips it better.
And you know, and that's a good point, because as we talked about between the angles of number 1 and number 3, number 1, if you look at it on the television screen, that you can see that the front is actually up in the top action here and the back is down on the lower side. So what ends up happening, as Jeff was mentioning, it's like that airplane, Jonathan, where the car is going to go through the air and the back end is going to lift up, and so it's going to take the wheels off the ground. So that's a very scary thing. I've had that situation before. In the situation here, or in the situation like we see on wing number 3, where the back end of the wing is up in the air just a little bit, the air rushing over the car gets to be pushed down on the wing and putting pressure on the wing, transferring it down through the suspension and actually onto the tires and into the ground. And these cars can create anywhere up to about 4,000 pounds of downforce going around a racetrack, which means the cars could almost run on the ceiling upside down. It's very, very impressive. So now that we've had that opportunity, we've learned about all this information, we're going to take some more questions from you folks back in the classroom. And to do that, we're going to go back and see Terry and Jesse. Guys?
Thank you. Who do we have on the phone calls now?
We have Trevor from New York. Trevor, what's your question?
Hi, Trevor.
Hello? My question is, if you go too fast and you hit a tight turn, will your car flip over?
Well, you know what might be a good idea? How about Kevin Forbes? There's really something very unique about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that they pioneered here, and Kevin was very involved in what's called the safer wall. I think it'd be great to have him start and talk about that. And then I know that there's a few drivers that have had some bad crashes among us. So what do you think, Kevin?
Well, it's a good point, Scott. What typically happens is just simply the way the race cars are built, they're low to the ground, they typically don't flip. They just simply slide out of control. So what usually happens is when the car loses control, and again, based on inertia, it just kind of slides into a straight line to the outside wall. Here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we have a very unique device called the safer wall. And basically what it is, it's a barrier that moves, so that instead of a car hitting a rigid body, it hits a wall, an outside wall that actually moves with the car. And it kind of takes that sting out of the car, and certainly takes the sting out of the driver.
Really well done, thank you. I think we've got a lot of calls, so we're going to move through them. Kevin here in Indiana, do you have a question for us, Kevin?
Alex.
Alex.
Alex from Indiana.
Oh yeah, good, thank you. Alex, do you hear us okay?
Alex, go ahead with your question.
No? Alex, do you hear us? Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
What is the top speed for a NASCAR?
Ooh.
That's a good question for Jeff Green. Jeff, what do you think?
That's a great question. We go to a lot of different racetracks, and it really depends on top speed on the gearing and the location. Here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, our top speed is probably about 210 miles an hour, and that's getting into turn 1 and turn 3. Great question, guys.
Thank you very much. I think we have Jace now, right, from Indiana. Jace, what's your question?
Do all drivers try to utilize drifting to eliminate air resistance?
Scott, what do you think? Drifting?
Well, you know, I think the drafting to reduce the air resistance is something that I think we all do, no matter what type of car we are. And Jake, it's sort of interesting, and Jonathan also, that we've talked about this in our classroom sessions. And you know something, these cars are so big that the car in front gets to put a big hole in the air, so maybe these guys behind in the NASCARs really enjoy the car in front poking that hole in the air for them. And in the Indy style cars here, the cars are a little smaller and they actually take up just a little bit less airflow going around the cars, but the cars behind them really rely on the air to actually make the car create its downforce on the under tray of the car and also the air going over the wings. So drafting is a crucial part about actually saving fuel and maybe making the car go faster, but our cars certainly rely on the airflow from the car in front to create that downforce. Guys?
Great. Got another caller?
We have
It's Nate.
Nate from Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Nate.
Nate, what's your question?
Hello, Nate.
Go ahead, we can hear you. What's your question?
Looks like we've lost Nate.
We have Jackie from New York. Jackie, what's your question? Jackie, go ahead with your question.
When was car racing invented and how did it start?
Wow, that's a big one. When was car racing invented? Geez, that would be in the early 1900s when the first races were taking place. There was actually a race in Chicago that I believe started about 1901. So right around when the Model T was taking place. But the first race here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was when? Do you remember? 1911? Yeah, and Ray Haroon won that first race, right? So this racetrack has probably one of the richest histories in all of motorsports. But that's a great question. I think as soon as people put wheels on an automobile, they wanted to race them. So it's, and lo and behold, here we are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that honors people that race. So great questions. I think
we have Haley from New York. Haley,
Okay.
what's your question? Haley, go ahead with your question.
I was wondering what the wings were made out of.
Ooh, wondering what the wings are made of. Antron, you guys want to give that a try? What normally are the wings made out of?
Well, typically, I think the wings are all made out of carbon fiber. They're made out of a carbon fiber composite, which makes them lightweight, makes them strong where they don't flex, and makes them very durable. So, because when you're putting downforce on a Indy car over 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of force, and on a top fuel dragster, which has got 6,000 to 8,000 pounds of force, it's got to be strong and structural. And that's what materials they make the wings out on all race cars, I believe.
Those are great questions. Way to go, everybody. Okay, now listen, here's what we're going to try and do. This is an exciting part of the show. Jeff Green is going to get in his car. Now, he can't go all the way around the track, but he's going to give us an idea of what it's like to fire one of these babies up and take us out on the track. Jeff, go ahead. Can we help you climb in?
If we can get Jake out here.
Jake, what are you doing in there?
Jake's got my seat right now. But
all right,
Jake,
come on out there,
Jake.
Jake. So normally, as you can see, there's no doors that it makes it real easy for the drivers to get in and out. And Jake's sliding out, and we'll see how Jeff climbs in. What do you think here, Jess?
I think it looks pretty difficult to get in.
It sure does. We'll get his belts put on him there a little bit, and as you can see, the wheel is actually able to come off, so it helps Jeff get in and out of the car. And we'll get his helmet for him as well. Isn't that a slick helmet? Very cool. Yeah, and there he's going. He's going to get the helmet on. Really important for the safety. You see the seat goes all the way around Jeff. This is built especially for him so that he stays completely safe. A lot of foam padding, and I think we're ready to fire it up. So get ready to plug your ears. Here we go.
Here we go.
Wow. And there he's getting ready to take it off. If he was really racing here, getting up to speed. What do you think, Jess?
I think that's really cool.
Didn't it sound fast? It's really cool.
Wow.
So he's coming back down. He'll be coming by us and really having, I would bet he's probably going to go over 100 miles an hour, I bet. But But normally when he's going to be racing, he would be going probably almost 180. But we're going to start wrapping up this first show, and we want to thank some folks, right? Who all helped us out here? We had Ball State University, right?
We had the Linger Group.
Yeah.
The Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
And we definitely want to thank the Best Buy Children's Foundation, right? Without them, we couldn't do this at all. They were great. So we really, really hope you enjoyed everything today. Yeah?
Yep.
You ready to be a TV star? Good deal. Bye, everybody. Let's take a look at the cars.